everyone. I'm Reverend Israel. I use he, him for pronouns, and I'm the minister of this congregation. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here this morning to this progressive spiritual community where we come together to nourish the spirit, connect in love, and live for justice. All of you are welcome here with all of your beliefs, doubts, questions, and curiosities. You are welcome to journey and grow with us as we all try to figure out how to lead lives filled with love. We gather in community here together because we need each other. It's that simple. We gather because we each carry a piece of wisdom and truth within us, but just a small piece. And so we need each other to try to reveal those small pieces of wisdom to each other so that together we can pull back and see the world, see life for the beautiful and intricate and complex picture that it truly is. And we gather in community right now during this time of pandemic and social distancing because gathering is an act of survival and hope. So I welcome all of you here to this space. And I welcome anyone who's joining us for the first or second time or feeling a little bit new here. Hi. Welcome here. Thank you for taking the brave step of checking us out, even though it can be scary to go to a new spiritual community for the first time. I welcome you. I invite you to check us out, check our website out, sign up for our newsletter. If you go to our website, uuclonline.org. And I also hope that you will find the time to feel connected today to what's going on here, even though we are only connecting through cameras on a screen. And I hope that you'll find some folks to talk to after the service in one of our breakout rooms and learn a little bit more about what goes on here. And someday, I hope we will meet you in person. This morning, we had, let me see, I'm just looking for one thing. I put some stuff in the newsletter this past Friday that you, okay, just gotta get it there, that you may or may not have seen, and that's okay. And I asked invited you to bring some kind of an object with you to the service today, something that feels important to you, something that you treasure and love. And I'll totally leave it up to you what that thing is. I have this pin with a heart on it and wings. That reminds me how love gives my values wings. And I often would wear it or carry it with me. And so I have this object with me today, but I invite you to find something during the song that comes up if you like. Or just actually, if you don't want to go find it, you could just imagine it in your mind and think about what it feels like to have it with you. And if you could also, if you're going to have a physical object, to have maybe a napkin or a cloth of some kind. And I'm going to explain why later. But I'm going to invite you, before we officially begin our worship, to start to think about a couple of questions that I'm asking us to reflect on today. And the questions are, where are you finding some jagged edges on yourself this morning, right now, where things feel maybe a bit rougher rather than smooth with you? Where are your jagged edges this morning? And what parts of your heart are you feeling like you need to keep hidden today? Those are the questions you are invited to reflect upon. And now I invite us into sacred space by lighting our chalice as Brad reads the words of our chalice lighting for us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brad Weaver, and my pronouns are he and his. I'm a member of the Worship Associates team, and I invite us all into sacred space as Reverend Israel lights our chalice. We kindle in our chalice every time we meet fire, so that this light may remind us of the brilliant light that shines in each of our hearts. We watch the flames rise up as if they were dancing, reminding us that life is always calling us to move and grow and reach for our visions of a better world. So come, let's gather around this fire, nourish our spirits at this hearth, and gather the strength we need to ignite the spark of courageous love in our lives and in our world.
Thank you, Brad. So as we begin our worship this morning, I ask you another question. I wonder if you feel more comfortable around perfect people or imperfect people. If such a thing exists, perfection. I know that I have always felt more comfortable around imperfect people. And I think it's because I know in my heart that spirituality is not about finding our rough edges and smoothing them or sanding them away till we are like this perfect, smooth stone. Even though we might think of spirituality as organized religion, as the thing that breaks off those jagged edges, the sin on your soul, and smooths them out and polishes them into a nice, beautiful stone. I submit this morning that spirituality, the purpose of spirituality, is to embrace the jaggedness and the brokenness. So if you, despite all of the spiritual practices that you do, the prayer or the meditation, all of the self-help books that you read, all of the yoga that you do, or the crystals that you hang in your house, if you, despite all of those things or whatever they are for you, find that you are still feeling a little jagged, that you still get road rage, that you still get pissed off sometimes, that you still get angry with your partner when they forget to close the cabinets or they leave their socks on the bed. If you just feel like sometimes no matter what you do, you still feel exhausted and overwhelmed by the world, and you just want to sit on your couch and binge watch some Netflix. You, despite coming to this community every Sunday, still feel like you have not achieved enlightenment and you cannot manifest all of the joy you want in your life. If you're still not feeling completely #blessed all the time. If you're still feeling like there are jagged edges, like you are more human than divine. Well, I have good news for you. You are not alone. You see, it is those jagged parts of ourselves, I submit, that are the parts of ourselves that we have for relationships, that we can grab onto, that we can be together and form relationships with each other. It's like our jagged parts are puzzle pieces that help us to fit together, help us to stick to one another so that we can learn and grow together. So as we seek our oneness together, even though none of us may feel completely whole, I remind us that we cannot escape ourselves and our humanness. But here in this space, I invite you to try to notice what's going on in the world and in yourself. And when you're feeling angry or frustrated or overwhelmed, just try to stop and act with a little bit more compassion and a little bit more love. That's what we're trying to do together. Trying to notice and to act just with a little bit more love. Spirituality is not about smoothing away those rough edges. It's about cracking open the rocks, the geodes, and revealing the beautiful jagged crystals on the inside.
would be one, as now we join in singing our hymn of love, to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Beautiful. So I have a story for you this morning. Lenore is not with us this morning, but I have a story for us today. And it's a story about two chefs. Some of you might know I was a cook, a chef in my previous career life. So this is a story about two chefs, two very accomplished French chefs who share a kitchen together. And the two chefs are preparing a very, very important meal for some very, very important people who are coming to visit. And they're running out of time, and they each have one dish left to create each. And they both realize that they need an orange for their dish. One chef is making a sauce, and the other one's making a cake. And they both need an orange, a blood orange, actually. And unfortunately, there's only one orange left in the kitchen. And both of their recipes call for one orange. So the two chefs, knives in hand, start running through the kitchen looking for the orange. And any good chef knows that you don't go running in a kitchen with a knife in your hand, but these two chefs are very activated that day, and they are very frantic because they need their orange, and they go searching for the kitchen, and they both find the orange sitting on the counter. And both of them look at each other, knowing that they both need that orange, and they both lunge towards it. And one of them grabs the orange, and they stand there with their knives in their hands, screaming at each other, saying, "I need that orange!" And they stand there probably for about 10 or 15 minutes arguing over about who gets the orange. And finally, one of them is just so frustrated that he grabs the orange out of the other one's hand, he puts it down on the cutting board, and he takes his knife, cuts it in half, and some of that orange juice starts bleeding out all over the place. And finally he says, "Okay, we'll each get half an orange." So they go to their respective sides and they start to make their recipes. And of course, one of them starts to take the zest off the orange with his peeler. And the other one stands in the corner, juicing the orange. And neither of them has quite enough for what they needed for their recipe. And they figure, well, I'll do it anyway, I'll make it work. But neither of them is truly satisfied. And neither of them gets what they want. And neither of them impresses the dignitaries that they want to impress that day. And both of them are feeling pretty pissed off. But at one point, afterwards, after they've made their dishes and they've cleaned up, they go back to the kitchen and they sit down exhausted and frustrated. And one of them looks over, the one who took the zest off the orange, looks over at the other chef's cutting board and sees this sitting on it. And they both look at each other and they just crack up laughing, because they realize that if they had taken the time to stop and to have a calm and rational discussion and to breathe and to talk to each other, that they could have both gotten more or less exactly what they needed.
Love knocks and waits for us to hear, to open and invite. Love longs to quiet every fear and seek to set things right. Love offers life in spite of foes who threaten and condemn. Embracing enemies, love goes the second mile with them. Love comes to heal the broken heart, to ease a troubled mind. Without a word, love bids us start to ask and seek and find. Love knocks and enters at the sound of welcome from within. Love sings and dances all around and feels new life begin.
Eli, I received a report that my 14-month-old is dancing at home listening to your guitar music. Now is the time when we embrace our interdependence, when we recognize that many of us carry heavy burdens in life. Many of us come to this space feeling like we are weighed down, 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 heavy with the burdens of life, with sorrows, with all of the things that we carry. And yet some of us come here feeling light. Like, where did my heart go? Well, I dropped my heart. How's that? Feeling light, like love gives us wings, like we are filled with joy. And some of us come with muddled complexities, not really knowing quite what life or love have brought for us that day. And we need a space to make sense of it all. Or we need a space to celebrate. Or we need a space just to feel held. This is our communal well. It's the place that holds all of our stories. It holds all of what we bring, all of the joys, sorrows, and complex truths. So if you come here with something on your heart, a joy, a sorrow, a complex truth, that you need the help of this community to share, to carry, to celebrate, to make sense of, now is your time to share it with us. And I invite you to type it into the chat in 15 words or less. And we'll read it out loud for you. And if you want us to share your name, please write "from" in your name. Otherwise, we won't share your name. And as you do so, I will place a stone into our well for you so that you know that your story is held here and embraced here, just as you are.
From Diane, feeling joy for our UU Expressions show last night, which helps us to know one another in new ways.
That was our virtual talent show last night.
The joy of UUCL always being a constant in my life, from Steph.
A stone for everyone getting to their vaccinations tomorrow and another snow day, including Paul Herr.
From BB, a stone, please.
From JV, one day at a time, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other.
Been feeling frayed or jagged, but extra thankful for family who help give me time to smooth myself out.
From Mern, remembrance for my beloved osteopathic teacher who died last week.
From Carol, like so many, my best friend is exhausted and depressed from overwork and isolation.
We celebrate that after months of treatment, Efren Rivera is now free of cancer. From Carol Campbell.
Thankful for this community that has given me friendship, inspiration, and a creative outlet during a music changing pandemic.
Remembering both my mom and dad, who had mid-February birthdays just a few days apart from each other.
For Marion Joyce, for my daughter Maeve, who is in a favorite chef competition and second place in her group, 4 days to go.
For little sparrows who send bats and butterflies.
A joy for shared experiences of the joys and sorrows.
From Michelle, gratitude for our time together during expressions last evening.
For all the parents who cannot have a break.
For children everywhere. From Holly.
From Paula, remembering Buddy Glover, whose memorial service yesterday showed how important he was to Lancaster.
For all the Texans suffering from the weather power loss crisis they are experiencing.
A happy birthday to Claudia Hostetter's daughter, Angela, my mother, from Rachel.
From Reverend Cap, a stone of gratitude and love for my loving partner, Lisa, sister-in-law, and kids, from the Facebook chat.
And for all of the joys, the sorrows, complex truths, all of the things that give us wings and roots, and the beautiful complexity of life, I place this final stone into our well. Even in the silent sanctuaries of your hearts, of our hearts, they are there, and we hear you, and we love you, and we carry your story with us. I invite you now to take a moment to breathe, to be together in this moment, knowing that stopping to pause does not make us perfect or completely whole or solve all of our problems. But stopping to pause together with intentionality that some know as meditation or prayer gives us time to reflect upon what is important and to see the world as it is. So if you did bring with you an object that is important to you, something that is meaningful to you, I invite you to look at it or to gaze upon it or to hold it. Or if you didn't, I invite you to picture something in your mind, something that is important to you. Maybe it's even an idea or a value, like justice or love. And to just take a moment to breathe and close your eyes or stare at the object and to notice your relationship to it. How does it make you feel? And now, if you have a cloth or even just your hand, I want you to cover it up. To put it away, to hide it. Or if you are picturing it in your mind, I invite you to push it out of your mind, to bury it. And I ask you what it feels like to hide the thing you care so deeply about. now, if you will, to uncover it. My friends, don't keep your heart hidden away. Let it shine. So, this morning, in general, what parts of your heart, what important values are you feeling like you need to keep hidden away, like you need to cover up? Whether or not that's to be polite or to avoid conflict, or simply to avoid being vulnerable with other people. And what happens when you're able to uncover them and let them give your heart wings? So a few weeks ago, or about a month ago actually, I preached a sermon here. And it was a social justice themed sermon. And I was feeling very passionate that day. And I remember I used some language that to me was truthful and spoke the truth of what was going on. And later that Sunday, I got an email from a member of the congregation thanking me for the sermon. But also asking me if maybe it was necessary for me to use some of the language that I used in the sermon. And at first, my immediate reaction was irritation. But then I took a step back and I took a deep breath. And I actually began an exchange over email with this person. And I actually felt like it was time for me to be honest and open up about what was going on and why I chose to use the language I used that day. And we had a really, really remarkable and beautiful and wonderful conversation. I talked about the things that were important to me. I told them that I used the language that I used because I felt like that we have no time for pretense in this congregation. No time for pretending like the way things are isn't the way they are. And so the language I chose was to point that out directly and speak truth. And also I used the language I used because I felt like it signals, if we can use normal everyday language that people use in their normal everyday lives, that it signals that everyone is welcome here to come here and be yourself, that you don't have to hide who you are or make your language more polite. And the other person shared with me his wisdom. He told me that he only brought this up because he cared deeply about my ministry and about making my ministry effective and about helping my ministry to reach as many people as possible and about helping the messages that we share in this congregation to not be blocked out by some people simply because of some language. And I felt really deeply connected by the end of that conversation. I realize that I am not alone in this work, and I have people who care deeply and who are here to minister with me to each other, to figure out how we can be more effective in what goes on here. The person that I had that email conversation with was Larry Carroll, who died very recently. And I am so glad that I was able to have that conversation with Larry, even by email. I'm so glad that I had the chance to have him tell me what was deep in his heart and what he truly cared about. I'm so glad that he did not keep his feelings, his heart covered up to me, and that he spoke his truth to me. And as a result, I felt more connected and loved because of it. My friends, do not keep your heart covered up for the sake of being polite, because you never know. You never know. Being honest with each other, even if it means some conflict, is vital to having community, is vital to being together. Speaking your mind, even if you think it's not the polite thing to do. Because otherwise, what are we doing here together if we can't be honest with one another? Now, there was one more thing that Larry said to me in the emails that I had back and forth with him, and he reminded me of the 3 gates of Rumi. I don't know if any of you know this, but Rumi had, Rumi, the philosopher poet, the Muslim philosopher poet, had a saying that before you speak, let your words go through 3 gates. The first is it true? The second is it necessary? And the third is it kind? And I think that we can be honest with each other, identify what is necessary, and yes, be kind with one another. And I say this because you may think that the kind thing to do sometimes is to not be truthful with one another. But I submit to you that the kindest thing to do is to speak what is on your heart. Because otherwise, we find ourselves in situations where we both have, or we think that we both have opposing needs and wants, and we end up at each other's throats because of it. Now, the interesting thing about the story of the 2 chefs, even though they let their tempers to some degree get the best of them, as many good chefs do, they didn't leave the kitchen. They at least both remained in the kitchen together. And in the end, they had a moment together and a moment of realization. Conflict in the instance of the story with the 2 chefs was stressful and nobody got what they wanted, really, when they both could have gotten exactly what they wanted. But they didn't storm off. So I propose this question: what would have happened if those 2 chefs had taken a moment to breathe and remained curious with one another? What would they have discovered? Perhaps they would have discovered that conflict can be generative, can lead to the creation of something new. Maybe they would have shared a recipe with one another. Maybe they would have both gotten exactly what they wanted and more. I think that conflict is creative. When we have conflict with one another, we can learn something about ourselves, what we need. We can learn something about someone else, and in turn, something about the world. It can unleash feelings and needs and desires and understandings that we never even knew were possible. Conflict is beautiful. And yes, conflict can be scary. I couldn't talk about conflict in this congregation without talking about the elephant in the room every time this subject comes up here, which is that conflict in this community has torn it apart in the past. And perhaps some of you have been caught in the crossfire. I have a literal file of grudges in the cabinet in my office. A literal file of grudges. And this is supposed to be a spiritual community. A community where we come to live into being our best selves. To maybe, you think, smooth out all of those rough edges and become a nice, beautiful, polished stone or piece of glass. But like I told you before, that's not the purpose of spiritual community, to smooth out the rough edges. But guess what? You're all human. And so am I. And if you think that conflict is unique to this community, I have news for you, it isn't. Wherever two people gather, there will eventually be something that somebody gets irritated with the other person about. But what makes the difference is how they respond to one another and how they choose even to name the things that they're irritated about in the first place. Conflict is not unique here. But I wonder, you probably hurt each other sometimes still. And perhaps some of you have even been hurt by a minister, by the person you most expected in the world to be able to trust. Maybe not most in the world, but by a person that you think you should be able to trust. Maybe a partner or someone else. Maybe I have even hurt one of you in some way. Conflict is going to happen. The question is, will we talk to one another about what happens when it does happen? Because I wonder sometimes that we don't. And I fear what happens if I hurt you and you don't tell me about it. Now, I love my job. I love being here, and you all pay my groceries essentially. And as you can see, I love to eat. And so I'd like to be able to keep on paying my groceries. And I'd love for you to be able to have a more beautiful community. And the trouble is, I know that all of you are very polite. I know that you think that in spiritual community, we have to be very polite with one another. But I'll tell you one more time, the polite thing to do is to speak up in a kind way, but in a truthful way when something is bothering us. And this is not just in spiritual community, but anywhere in our lives. The polite thing to do is to speak up because here's why. Speaking up shows that you care. Speaking up shows that something that is going on is important to you. Something deeply important to you that is intermeshed with your own values and ideas and needs. Speaking up shows that you care enough about this place or our relationship or your relationship with someone else to talk and to disagree and to come to an understanding. Conflict is not the end of a relationship. It doesn't have to be. It can be a new beginning. It can be the start of something more beautiful. Now, there are lots of strategies for how to deal with conflict and how to talk to one another, but I'm not going to get lost in the weeds of all of them. I'm just going to give you a few ideas. Okay? Idea number one. When something happens, talk about the issues rather than directing it personally at another person. Separate the person from the behavior. Remember that just because someone does something wrong does not mean that they are bad. Just because you do something wrong does not make you a bad or a sinful person. It just means that you did something that had a negative effect on someone else. It doesn't make you a bad person, but it doesn't free you from the responsibility to understand and make things right either. Idea number two. And this goes without saying, don't keep your heart undercover. Idea number three. Try to back off from a sense of false urgency all the time when we're experiencing conflict. Take a moment to stop, put your knife down, take a breath. Don't rush towards the orange with your knife in your hand. Take a breath and try to remain curious. In fact, try to receive what's happening as if it were a gift, as if someone had a beautiful wrapped gift to give you. Like there was something wonderful to be uncovered and discovered in the interaction. And lastly, and this one's important, be aware of the power dynamics in the situation. Who has power? Who is in a position of authority and power? Who feels more comfortable talking? And if that person is you, the person who has more power, stop and listen, especially to people who are on the margins or people with less power. Check yourself and listen. Conflict is a function of caring. And conflict is vital to a healthy community. Because what happens when we keep our heart undercover? If you put a plant underneath a shaded cover, it will never grow. And if you take a cover and a beautiful bright flame and you cover it up, you'll find that our chalice, the beautiful bright flame of truth and light and knowledge in our chalice, will be snuffed out under heavy blankets of silence. So instead, let's talk to each other about what's important, what we care about. And together, let's discover and learn and grow and become something more beautiful, not more perfect, but become something new and beautiful together, where we can grab onto those jagged edges.
When I hear your voice, I almost cry. And when you laugh, it makes me sigh. When I read your words, I wonder why we're together now, more than ever now.
And though distant you may seem to be, you really aren't so far from me. I can feel you here right where I am. If you close your eyes, maybe you can.
Sing to me now, sing me a song, the one where the mountains and the sky come crumbling down, and still we stand side by side. When I see your face, oh, how you shine, a precious light, a star divine.
How your beauty just reflects back mine. Hold out your heart like a lifeline.
Sing to me now, sing me a song, the one where the mountains and the sky come crumbling down, and still we stand side by side. I say to you now, I sing you a song, the one where the mountains and the sky come crumbling down, and still we stand side by side. Side by side.
We gather in community because we know deep in our bones that we need each other to survive. We practice our interdependence here in many ways, by sharing our hearts with one another, by offering comfort and presence, and by learning and growing together. And now we call ourselves to practice our interdependence by giving what we can to support the financial needs of this community. Because we are a community that practices interdependence with the larger community, we share half of our offering with our community partners. This month, we share our offering with Milagro House, a nonprofit that supports women and children by working to break down the barriers and systems that lead to generational poverty. You can make all of this possible by texting the amount of your donation to the number on the screen or by visiting our website. Thank you for your support.